Welcome back, everybody. Just Mike here. Anyway, today we have a kitchen or parlor clock, whichever way you like to say it. And this one's kind of unique because it does have the temperature on it and has the glass with the, I don't remember what they call it. I'll put it up in here to tell the weather, I do believe is what it's for. And anyway, let me show you the clock I got. So this is the clock I got. This here was the tube I'm talking about that tells the weather. I'll let you know a little bit later, as my brother's got a paper on this that explain how it works. But I think you'll probably have to warm this thing up or shake it up or something to get it reset. And then depending how cloudy it is, tells you what the weather is. Over here it has the temperature, and that's silver down here, so I'd say this is a mercury thermometer on there. This here clock, set in the way it is right now, it'll stop, but if I turn it, because my desk isn't level as can be, it just keeps running just fine. It does not gong. It's got a very nice pendulum, and turning that is what I do believe makes it go faster or slower. Of course, you got this here crank, and it does have a gear down there to adjust the speed of that, as you can see right there. Anyway, this here's one of the legs to this side over here. This here broke off, so that's got to be re-glued on. And for what little damage is on this clock, it's not even worth dealing with that company. Now this here top piece does pop off, which is surprising. It's got the wood pegs on it, and I didn't notice until later. You can see there used to be another piece on each end. I can see this is cracked along here. Someone tried to fix it. Also, this piece here is broken off. Oh, wait a minute. I don't know if I have that piece or not. This is set inside the clock, so I have a feeling that's all I have to do is make another one for it to match. So that's nice to have that. It's sad this piece is off of there. And in my area, this is oak. In my area, we have red oak. And so this here is a white oak. So my red oak would not match. But I might try to fix that anyway. We'll see about that. Otherwise, it is a nice topper on there. And it's nice that it comes off, so if you need to ship it off because you sold the clock or whatever, it would make it easier to ship this clock. So anyway, the first thing I want to do, because this clock it runs but it does not gong, there's something wrong in there. The minute hand, the end is broke off of it, but I'm going to take the hands off and take the dial off and see what it looks like in behind here. This had a very small piece of pin. I'm not even sure if that belongs in there, but I'm gonna have to put a new pin in here anyway. That's just wrong. There's your flat washer on there. And of course your hand. This looks like it might have been broke at one time and they repaired it. And of course this is, I'm going to call it wedged on there, but usually this barrel that's on here, if it's too loose, you just squish it back together again and you could make it tight. So I'll get those two screws out. This dial has screws in it that are way too big. This one might be okay that's on here. But this screw might have been in a door hinge, I don't know. This is a Waterbury clock. I'll show you on the back in a minute. Now looking in here, I can already tell, at least to me, it looks like there's pieces missing because the part that's supposed to drop in here to let the clock know how many times the gong, that's missing. The gong itself is missing to hit this. So far we're not hitting too well on the parts inside this clock. And let me show you a little closer on this movement. And there's what I see so far. This is Waterbury Clock Company, patent 22/1874. And like I say, setting the pendulum on there. So the spring's wound up all the way on this side, but won't trigger anything. There's nothing to trigger, is the way I'll put it. I don't know if it's a 6.5 or an 8.5. It just looks a little strange. I don't know if you can see that okay or not. So let's go ahead and pull the movement out and see what we can find, like I say, that's missing. You can see the hole there for where the gong is supposed to be, and it should have the rod coming up over here somewhere to hit where it'll trigger at. I did forget to show you the back of the clock here. This is an 8-day strike, Wyoming strike, half hour. If you study this enough, you might be able to read it. I'm not going to deal with trying to read that, but I want to glue this back on because to me, the paper's almost everything on this clock, and I just soon have as much original left on this clock as possible. So we got the movement out. They wired the spring so they could get it back in the clock, I guess, and it wouldn't work anyway because it'd probably just continuously run because it doesn't have the part on here to go into those holes to tell it whether it's done ringing or not. So anyway, I think I'm going to go ahead and take this clock apart and clean it and look online and see if I can come up with another movement that has the parts that I can put onto this one, like I say, such as the gong. I did put a zip tie on the spring that operates the time side, so we're going to release this here. I hold on to this. Considering it doesn't look bad. And let's see if this thing normally you can pry this open with the razor blade because it's so small and make it so that will pop out easier. And because this is brass, it is soft and will pull open. So you can see this here spring is kind of wobbled. You can set this on a hard surface and run a screwdriver or something across it, and you should be able to straighten that out. I went ahead and put a screwdriver in there just to stop it. So I'm going to do, let me see, what I'm going to do is this is a spring here that makes the clicker work. I'm going to flip that up off of the clicker. No, it doesn't want to. It's stuck in here and here, so it's not that simple to flip up. So what I'm going to do is wind this up a little bit, and I'm going to pull the clicker back. I don't know if you can see in there or not. It's kind of gummed up. It's goes and stops, goes and stops. So that's all let down. Now this has screws in it instead of nuts. Because the screws are on this side, I'm going to go ahead and take it off that exact way also. Now hopefully you've taken pictures. If you're going to try to do this, you'll want pictures of your top, and go ahead and take pictures of the sides all the way around so you can see where all these gears fit. But we're also going to take this frame off carefully and see if we can get this thing out to where we can take pictures of without this front plate on, so that way usually that's how you're putting it together, obviously, and you might be able to identify each one of these gears a lot easier. So here's what we have. This here obviously goes on here first, but I wanted to set it into place. You can see we're missing our levers and whatnot in order for the gong to work. And so realistically we only have 3 pieces over here. This would be the 4th one, and then the rod would come through to hit into each one of these grooves here. This hasn't worked for a while. It's pretty stiff. Like I say, this thing's kind of filthy too, so if things don't move, if you don't wind your clocks all the time, this is what's going to happen also. They're going to just start drying up. You need the clocks to run. So let's go ahead and take them apart of what's left to the gong side, which is simply 3 pieces. And then here on the time side, again, you can see how dirty they are. With the 2 bumps like this, you can see that it definitely is a strike on the half hour and hour. And then the spring, of course you always want to be careful and whatnot, but get it off its hole and it just comes right off. And now I can let it go a little bit more. Now when I go to clean this spring, I'll put gloves on and then I'll just work this zip tie off and it's going to come uncoiled. And it normally doesn't just blow up on you. And also they ended up with a memory because of being wound so many times. And to clean the spring, you're going to kind of get rid of the memory it had. I mean, it's still going to keep it, but you're going to try to straighten the spring out as much as possible as you're trying to clean it, and that's going to give it a chance to run even longer. So realistically, I'm ready to take and put this into the cleaner. Now normally a clock this old, this shouldn't have a lacquer finish on it, and so, and with this ground in dirt and oil, it's, some of that's going to probably stay on here. I can't help that, but I'm going to not worry about how long I keep this into the sonic cleaner. I just want this thing clean, and just because of what this clock is, I might go ahead and shine the plates up, even though, again, you're never going to see them, but I still might go ahead and shine these plates up. Now to get this here off, right here, there's a pin. You can see the hole there. You have to lift that up and get it out of that hole. Move it over if you can. There we go. This here is bowed just a little bit, so it's not putting too much pressure on there, but it's putting on enough pressure to hold it into place. You can see how that corrosion green look is. That's from not running. So that there's riveted on there, whatever. No big deal. When you go to clean this thing, you're going to scrub all that anyway. So I have all the parts that I have with this movement cleaned and ready to go back into the frame of the clock. But not saying this is a special clock because, well, it is a special clock, not really fancy, but the way I look at it, because of what it has on the outside of the box of the clock, it makes it special. So what I did is I looked on eBay and I found an exact movement, which this is 6.5, but the one I ordered says 6.5, but it's not double stamped like this one is. But I'm still going to use the same frame. It's just that I'll have all the parts for this clock. Why someone took it out and didn't put it back into the box, I don't know. It could have been damaged gears, but I'm gonna make this clock whole again because I went ahead and spent the extra money for a new movement, or not a new movement, an old movement, but it has all the parts with it. So anyway, I'll come back in about that fast to show you what I got. So this here means that we're waiting for parts. We need to refresh this. It would be refreshed if you had it in the sunlight, but I don't know why you'd want your clock in the sunlight. And so this here bracket here is a little bit tight. I was able to wiggle this out. And possibly you can see it does have crystals in here that I think need to be refreshed. On my brother's bigger one that they still make today, this is what it says. It's a storm glass. So to refresh these, you're supposed to set it down in a cup of hot water and wait till all of these crystals turn clear again, and then your glass will be refreshed and start telling whether you have a storm or not, I do believe. Coming or nothing. Also, I need to re-glue this, clean it up, re-glue it on down here, because in shipment it was broke off. So I need to clean this metal up. I don't know if that's brass or not. I'm going to use a little bit of a cleaner onto it. This clock has been refinished, not the best, but you can see the old finish that's kind of balled up there. Underneath, which most of these older clocks need, is they normally have two nails here to hold this box part on, and normally this clock is dried out, and so those nails don't necessarily stay in, and so you would go ahead and take either one of these nails, but normally this one here, and put a screw in its place to keep this held back together so it doesn't fall out. Okay, I got a cup of hot water, and I'm just going to set this in there and pretty much let this cool off in there too. I don't think you have to. The only thing you need to watch for is to make sure the crystals all turn clear in here. See, that's not super hot water, but it's what we'll call hot water. Let's give it some time. So it's only been about 5 minutes, and I shook it up a little bit because there's dark coloring in there. But realistically, it's already clear. Okay, on to cleaning these springs. Now, if you've taken pictures or whatever, you know this spring goes around this way. This spring goes the opposite way. And so, if you'd like, keep your parts separated so you know what side these go on. This one here has got the wire on it, so that's why I remember this one goes to the gong side, in which I needed parts. I got the parts clock in. I got the parts over here all clean, all the levers I needed and whatnot, and I took the gears out of the movement I bought extra, just to make sure in case I didn't have all the gears in here. So I can't find my gloves. This isn't too much of a heart attack coming off. You just have to hold on to this part here, just keep it squeezed in as you're getting the zip tie off, and then it will open up to about so. What I'm going to do is I'm going to work this off, come up to the outside, I guess we'll call it, to where I can just pop it off maybe. And I'm going to hold on to the whole spring if I can. And you're going to want to let it go anyway, but not too fast. Okay, a little bigger. Bigger is better because that's telling me this memory of this dirty spring still has an open memory, and so it's not as important. But when I go to clean this, besides after it comes out of the sonic cleaner, I'm going to be stretching this thing straight as I can. See how dirty that is? Stretching it as straight as I can to take out the old memory, so this thing will open up enough that it will run 8 days like it's supposed to. This one here is going to be a little more difficult, mainly because number one, it's wound up more, but it's got the wire on there. I might be able to untwist this wire. Yep. And hold on to it. Careful that gear don't get you. It's best if you have office hands, as in no calluses whatsoever, to wear gloves. Like I said, I kind of cleaned my shop, if you want to call it cleaned, and I don't know where I set my gloves. So if we want, we can mark this with this wire here, because that's what came with it. Spin them around to get them to come out normally. Which you're going to be spinning them opposite of the way they wind, so it'll come undone. Sometimes it's too tight in there. It's not too important to get off of there, but it makes it easier to clean these springs once you go to wipe them down. They don't want to come off easy, good enough to me, or for me. So I have this brown scratchy pad I got at Home Depot. It's not as aggressive as the green one. And I normally spray WD-40 on this and then scrub down my springs. I'm just going to use the denatured alcohol and see how well that works, just cleaning them with that. And then once they're dried and whatnot, I'll put them back into the frame and wind them up and put a zip tie on them, so that way they'll already be in the frame, wound up, so they're all back to be in the right size, and I can get my gears back into the frame without fighting the springs. I have the screwdriver in there to keep it from unwinding, but I have to hold the wheel because it will bring the screwdriver over to this side of the plate, and I don't want to waste my finger winding, I guess we'll call it. I made sure there's a stop for the spring from going into the gears. I made sure this spring was on this side of it, so it's winding up properly, I guess we would say. Putting the zip tie on and making sure it's not hitting that stop. Get the zip tie into the center. And now I can take my screwdriver out and release this. So now the tension's on the zip tie. Now I can go ahead and take my screws out on this side so I can get this plate back off, set the next spring on this side, and do the same thing. And there you have it. Take the tissue, and where you over oiled, just dab it off with the tissue so it's not just hanging around there. Still have these on there. And I'm still adjusting the timing on this and adjusting these new wires that I got off the movement I got off of eBay. And so I have to get them to be adjusted right in order for them to make the clock gong when it's supposed to. With a toothpick, you don't want to forget, you lube these just a little bit. Some people don't get by with it. Others, this is a drag on this clock, so it won't want to tick. Just some clock oil. Oh, and we got just a little bit too much on there. I've been having a real hard time getting this arm here to, once it drops in here, by the time it comes over here, it's hitting the top of the tooth or whatever, or as it's gonging, it starts hitting the top of those teeth. Have to make a spring wire on here because this has never had one. And so what I did is I took my wire, I twisted around this one to basically tie it up, and I know I want this thing to spring downward. I brought it over across this, and now I'm going around this way. Some of these you can't do on a drill like you see for other applications. This here, you just keep it tight, and you try to keep these loops here kind of tight together too. I mean, it's not a heart attack, but you don't want them ½ inch apart. It'll look cleaner if you keep it tight. How many is it supposed to have? I have no idea. All I know is you can adjust this once it's in the clock. Whether if you have too many, then you can let this go around once. It will relieve the pressure. This is thin wire, so you're not talking about heavy duty pressure there. So there, I got it on there. Now it's ready to stick in the clock after I get things done and see how well it works. So this is the original movement, and I took parts out of this in order to fulfill what was missing on this side. And even though the plates say the same thing and everything, I'm thinking there's something wrong with the gearing, because as this here strikes, it might hit in the hole there this time, but the next time it's not going to hit. So there's a possibility all these bushings I put in here are worthless, in so many words. So what I'm going to do is put the parts back into this movement after I clean it. As you can see, I gave this a shine on practicing, showing you how to shine these things up. I'm going to go ahead and just clean this whole thing, put it together, and see if I end up with the same problem. I'm going to check this wheel out here with this wheel here also to see if there's a difference. I don't know why there'd be a difference, because they're the same movement. So this is the movement I got online. This is the movement that came out of the clock. The plates say the same exact thing, so you'd think these are the same, but they're not. And I'll show you an example after I pull this back off. So this here, you notice it's got this, and this here I can turn to get it to going where I need it to. Here's this one. It has the lever sticking out off of it. And this one will only gong on the hour, because it only has one trigger, where this one was able to gong on the hour and the ½ hour, because it has 2 points there. So on this movement, I went ahead and put everything back together that came from it. So I didn't put in the ½ hour and hour strike. This movement is to strike only on the hour, and I'm fine with that. I guess this is a good lesson, because this here, I don't normally work on just one specific clock. I do cuckoo clocks, and I do the parlor clock or the kitchen clock. Always a different clock, and I didn't think when I bought this movement to check to see whether it did the ½ hour and hour strike. Normally you're working on a movement that's whole, which originally this one here wasn't. And so that's where I kind of got confused or whatever. And so anyway, I'm leaving this out that goes to the pendulum because I want this thing to tick and work in the oil and work in if there's any other problem. Laying on its face, it ticks part of the time, most of the time, whatever. I'm going to go ahead and hang this up, and then I'm going to clean the case up a little bit because it was kind of slopped varnish or whatever on it, and I just want to smooth it out with a little bit of steel wool and denatured alcohol, because I don't necessarily want to strip it. I just want to smooth it out, and then once that, we'll say, dries, I can wax the case. So I wasn't really having a heart attack about this clock being refinished possibly by somebody, and you can kind of tell by this backboard it's got the shiny, thick looking varnish or urethane or something they put on here. I just didn't like the idea that it did have globs of red colored finish that wasn't cleaned off all the way. They did a halfway decent job, but just not quite right. It's good enough to me right now after I ran the thinner over this, the denatured alcohol, and I didn't dig in too deep. I just tried to smooth out things, and it doesn't look bad. The only thing I got now to do is this board here is loose, so I'm going to put some glue in here in behind and get that glued back down, and realistically this case is ready. I have this board glued down now, and so this clock is ready. The only thing I don't know for sure is I do know the thermometer in here, the mercury thermometer, it's not set right, and I don't know how to adjust it. I don't know if this heated up enough that it messed it up, or if I need to freeze it in order to get it to go down and push some air in here. I don't know. I'm not going to mess with it because I don't know, so I'm just going to leave it because it's interesting to have the mercury thermometer here with the clock. So anyway, like I said, I'm pretty much done with the case. I took this and I did let it run down. I do have these zip ties still on here, so I have to wind it up again, take the zip ties off, and then I can install it into the clock. So of course I'm going to wind this thing up. And there I can see this is already loosened up. And I might as well wind this side up too so I can loosen it up. So this is what the pendulum hangs on, and as you can see, it's crooked. I do believe you can set on something hard, piece of wood or whatever. This happens to be aluminum. That's much better. Now I'll install this in the clock. Turn the hook up towards the front. I'm going to drop it in here. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to squeeze this shut again. And that's going to help hold this from falling out. And it does have that little piece of wire on the end of it. So now I can go ahead and get this installed in the clock box. So I have the clock level. This here rocks back and forth. I think it's because the wire flat part here is just weak. I could be wrong, but I think that's what it is. Anyway, you hear it's not ticking right. So that's telling me that this needs to come over more. This wire here that goes up here. So I'll give that a little bit of a bend. Try to protect that a little bit. I've bent it quite a bit, and that is a bad thing, looks like. So that sounds a heck of a lot better there. And like I say, I'm not positive. I do believe it's that flattened part of the metal that's causing this to shake back and forth. Like I say, I don't like that, but I can live with it as long as this clock runs properly. So let me go ahead and get the dial on and start messing with this. I did want to mention also, I glued in and cut off some toothpicks in these holes because they had big screws and the screws didn't match thickness and everything else. And so I want to put in brass screws. Yes, they're Phillips head, but I don't have the flat head ones. And so I'm going to put in the brass screws, and because those holes are filled now, I shouldn't have a problem. So it ticks evenly, but I have to take this apart again because there's a place in here you can put a wire that you trip, and in case you have the gong off, you can trip it until it gets to the hour that you need it on with the hour hand. So I got to take this apart, and I'll show you the area where you can put that trip rod. So right here you have a loop, and that's where you'd hook the wire, so that way it comes through the movement and sits down here. That way, if you need to, you can push this up and it'll trigger this. I got it in there. And it's best to take it out so you can get in and get that wire that's in there pushed together as, let's say, as tight as possible so it's not hanging up on any of these other gears. I glued this piece on, used rubber band, and connected them with the toothpick to hold them through here. So I don't need a real tight seal. And then I went ahead and made one of these. I'll have to stain it, but I did the same thing. Loop the rubber band through. So I got this one running, strikes on the hour only. I still need to clean the glass, go ahead and wax the frame, and I'm gonna have to redo this because I've had the clock up and down a few times, and all you need is hot water out of the tap. Let it set in there, all these crystals will melt, and you'll be back in business again. Like I say, the mercury thermometer there, don't know anything about how to reset it or anything, but it has it on there, it has this on there. That's just the cool part of the clock. So we got another clock fixed. We learned something, and what we learned, if you haven't worked on them for a while, pay attention. Like I say, I did order this movement. It didn't say when it struck or anything else, and I didn't realize it until after I started cleaning it and putting it back together. I noticed things were a little bit different. Anyway, thanks for stopping by and watching the video. Don't forget to subscribe because it's free. And until next time, God bless.